Superintendent Smith, will you please introduce this item?
I will, and I will also reiterate my thanks to people who have participated in this process. It's been a lengthy process and one that many people have participated with since the beginning. And as you know, this is a process that we've been doing across the district over multiple years. This year targeted the Jefferson cluster and was working to look at schools that were over-enrolled or under-enrolled with the goal of making sure students had access to strong programming. And during the course of the process, numbers of options were put forward that looked at both what happens to strengthen our schools as K-8 models, what happens if we work to build a middle school option in the Jefferson cluster, which many people were desiring, and how did we deal with the school communities that were over and under enrolled. So buildings that could no longer hold the number of students who are attending them and schools that were too small to actually offer a robust program. Over the course of the process, the options that were presented increased the number of courses or the sizes at individual grade levels. But one of the biggest conversations, I think, and one of the most consistent things we heard in conversations throughout the community was that the level of disruption in the Jefferson cluster was a more significant factor in undermining success of any one of these wholesale changes. So as we were proceeding through the process, looking for options that actually promoted stability in the cluster and stability for school communities ended up playing a more, and this is looking at historic instability in the cluster having been a factor, but so I will say what emerged, and one of the themes that emerged was we need to do something that ends up promoting stability. I think another thing that we heard throughout the process was the desire of individual school communities to have the opportunity to really rebuild enrollment for their schools and have both the framework and support from the district in doing that, and seeing that as a higher value. And then finally, there was a request for us to take a step back and look at some broader district-wide processes like our enrollment and transfer policy, and also boundaries in a district-wide framework as opposed to how we have been approaching it, which has been cluster by cluster. And that the idea of stepping back and doing a boundary conversation or a boundary examination that looked at the entire district might present different opportunities. So given those themes that emerged from the community conversations, the desire for a middle school became one that requires a level of change that is greater than would be consistent with trying to hold stability while we're stepping back and examining the larger issues. So what I am putting forward to the board this evening is a revised and it's slight revisions to the proposal. So you've been seeing a proposal that's come forward and has gone through tweaks as we've continued to engage in conversation and get feedback from the community. But the recitals in the at the preamble to the resolution that the board will consider tonight is actually the revised resolution. I'm going to walk you through this fairly specifically and extract some things that are the specific contents of the recommendation so that you understand what it is, because what the board will actually vote on is a simpler set of statements. So I am going to read you some of what is contained within that recommendation. Community members called for broad district-wide efforts that would impact the enrollment potential for their schools. A review of the student assignment and transfer policies, including the state's new open enrollment law. And second, boundary changes that would not be constrained to specific clusters or sets of schools. So that will translate to a direct recommendation that's part of the resolution. And I'm now on number 9, so I'm jumping through all the historic and just getting straight to the recommendations. Number 9, In response to the community's strongly expressed desire to minimize disruption, the superintendent, myself, is not recommending the cluster-wide school reconfiguration decisions that would be necessary to restore a Jefferson cluster middle school. However, if capture rates and enrollment increase, the district will continue to consider the possibility of providing both a middle school and K-8 options to Jefferson cluster families. So that piece of the recommendation is specifically saying if we're going to focus our efforts on existing school communities and rebuilding those school communities, if there is a point where we're really being successful in building capture rates, we will hit a point where we can also look at the ability to sustain a middle school in the cluster. Our capture rates at the moment are not of a level that we can both do the current K-8s and sustain a middle school, but if we hit a point that we are generating that kind of capture rate, we take a look at adding a middle school. 10, seeking board action to end the Ockley Green K-5 Focus Option Program and consolidate Chief Joseph and Ockley Green to a single K-8 neighborhood school on 2 campuses beginning in September of 2013. The exact grade structure for each campus would be determined as a part of a transition planning process this spring involving both staff and community members. The administrative structure will be consistent with other shared campus schools, which is a single principal and 2 assistant principals overseeing the 2 buildings. A process to determine leadership of the new K-8 school will follow the district's established administrative hiring process and include community and staff input. Part of the process would also include naming the consolidated neighborhood school. Students attending the Ockley Green Focus Option Program currently may choose to remain as part of the newly formed neighborhood K-8, return to their neighborhood school, or may apply to attend King's Pre-K-8 and be ensured a place in an arts-focused program. The staff will also create an implementation team to address the above-mentioned issues, as well as community building, transportation, the school naming process, school identification number, Title I status, student supports, and special education classrooms. This team will also be responsible for the continued monitoring and evaluation of the 2-campus model. And I read you that list because many of the issues that are coming up are ones that are about implementation. They're not about the policy decision that the board will make. So there's a list being created of issues that the community has brought forward saying we want to make sure these things get considered. Those will all be ones that would be identified and assigned to an implementation team at the point we have an actual decision. 11, the superintendent, I propose the following program level changes to strengthen and stabilize the Jefferson Pre-K cluster schools. 1, ensure that all the schools in the Jefferson cluster are staffed to offer core program requirements for both elementary and middle grades. 2, continue to allocate resources and support for Vernon and King to sustain implementation of the International Baccalaureate programs. 3, develop a sustainable district-wide plan for middle and high school feeder patterns for elementary Spanish language programs and program expansion that would include schools in the Jefferson cluster. 4, work with school communities to determine how to best provide district-level support to raise the capture rate and explore developing and/or strengthening a school-wide thematic focus in schools that do not yet have one, such as the arts, 3 to PhD, environmental education, STEM or STEAM, so the science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, immersion, or IB. So many of the schools in the Jefferson cluster have a theme, but if there is not one, use a thematic focus and support ones that are being generated by the local school community to strengthen program achievement and capture. Building on its recent success, staff will develop a plan with the King School community to increase enrollment in the school as the federal school improvement grant sunsets. Prioritize facilities educational upgrades such as the middle grade science lab at Vernon and other projects covered by the school building improvement bond. Maintain the special education classrooms and autism program at Woodlawn and the intensive skills classroom at King. Continue to provide teaching and learning support to the emerging bilingual students in the Jefferson cluster while engaging in outreach and recruitment efforts for Beach's dual language immersion program to reach the target of 50% native Spanish speakers in that program. Number 12, I'm directing our staff to engage with the Superintendent's Advisory Committee on Enrollment and Transfer, SACIT, to review student assignment and transfer policies, identify opportunities to address broader citywide demographic shifts and boundaries, and expand possible solutions to present enrollment challenges and align with the racial educational equity policy. To continue a site search for a suitable new location for Access Academy, and thank you to students who testified about Access tonight, to ensure a move prior to the start of the 2013-14 school year, and to include an evaluation of program size as part of that process. And then finally, and I referenced this before, but I think it's probably one of the most important features of this whole conversation, work in collaboration with school communities to encourage enrollment growth and outreach to families. So those end up being the specific recommendations, and as I say, separate from that, but including some of the things that I just referenced, are the list that would go to a staff team who become the implementation team to support implementation in the cluster. So a lot of that stuff actually gets outlined in a more specific way for directing how staff then implements. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the board, who then will walk you through what the actual resolution says.
Great. Thank you. So we'll now consider resolution number 4718. Do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Director Gonzalez moves and Director Knowles seconds the motion to adopt resolution 4718. Ms. Houston, is there any public comment?
Yes, we have 5 speakers. Our first 2, Kristen Sheeran and Maxine Dexter.
You can go ahead. That's
Good evening. My name is Kristen Sheeran, S-H-E-E-R-A-N. I'm the parent of a child at Access Academy and president of our PTA. I want to thank Superintendent Smith for including Access and our need for growth in your recommendations before this board this evening. For several years now, we've been working with the district, including Sue Ann Higgins and Judy Brennan, to find a new location for Access. And throughout the process, I'd like to think that our school community has been patient, accommodating, and constructive. The majority of our students take classes in portable classrooms that are now a decade old. Their lunch period is so condensed that parents often find uneaten lunches in backpacks. They take PE outside in all kinds of weather because we don't have access to a gym. Our middle school students take high school equivalent science classes without the benefit of a lab. Generally, our parent community doesn't complain. We understand resources are limited. And we know that despite these limitations, our children are getting something they cannot get at any other school, public or private. If Access never grew, our current students would be fine. So when we ask you to find a location for Access that can enable it to grow over time, please know that we're not asking for our own children. We're asking for other PPS students who need access but who cannot get in because of lack of space. Portland Public Schools has known for years that the need for access exceeds its capacity, and it has done little to reach out to students who qualify. As a result, historically, only those parents with the means to research options or the luck to have come across a teacher or counselor who knew about Access have enrolled. This is no way to run a school for alternative education. This is how you produce a majority white, majority middle class program. Our parent community and principal have worked hard over the last several years to change this and remove the systemic bias in whom and how one applies for access. And as a result, our applications have climbed significantly, particularly from underrepresented communities across Portland. We're doing our part. We ask you now to do yours. It's with a heavy heart that I listened to members of this board a few weeks ago vocalizing some of the greatest misperceptions about access. It's clear that you don't know our students. Please come and meet them. I promise that when you do, you will never again question whether these kids' needs could be met by a neighborhood tag program. You will never again imply that these kids are privileged. Being born with an intellect that is out of sync with more than 99% of the population, being born with an intellect that is out of sync with your own physical and emotional development is actually a burden, not a privilege, in an inappropriate educational environment. I love and admire my son, but there isn't a day that goes by that I'm not reminded of how much easier and perhaps happier his childhood would be
if he had been born somehow less gifted. Access works because it helps children like my son carry these burdens. It works because it provides them with a nurturing community where they can relate to their same age peers. And it works because it helps them develop their natural-born proclivities into lifelong assets. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Robert Dexter, D-E-X-T-E-R. My wife was going to speak, but it wasn't clear that she could get here tonight, so I was going to share some of her words with you. And you may find that some of my thoughts and comments echo some that you have just already heard. I'm a parent of 2 children at Access Academy. After participating in many meetings through the Jefferson rebalancing, it has been clear that there are significant misperceptions among people in this room about what Access is, and I would like to directly address some of these misperceptions. One issue raised was whether it was appropriate to have our children in a separate school that takes them out of their community schools. Our school is for children whose neighborhood school has been unable to serve their needs, and thus they need an alternate learning environment. Often it has been too difficult to differentiate the curriculum adequately for our kids, leading to the school or the parent suggesting that an alternate situation is needed. But by the time this occurs, it is usually the case that that child has become marginalized, bullied, and/or ignored. They are aware that they are different, but they often don't have the maturity or insight to understand why that means that they're being treated differently. Yes, these are children who score in the 99th percentile on standard testing, but it is their inability to assimilate well or to belong in the classroom that leads to them developing problematic behaviors, social and emotional issues that make them unable to stay in their usual environment. It is due to these issues that Access has 75 families on the waiting list from last year and many more that are visiting us currently. The tragic thing is that these are only the parents who are aware of their child's plight, able to advocate for them, and are even aware of Access as an alternate option for their children. There are many more out there. Another issue was the lack of perceived diversity at our school. To paraphrase one of your esteemed members, Martin Gonzalez, not all the geniuses in the school district are white. And we agree with that. In fact, 35% of our current students are students of color. However, this number is not higher because our growth has been stunted for years due to lack of district investment in and support for the school and by our location. By keeping us from growing, you are both excluding interested families and not allowing for expansion of our reach to families who may be less enabled and less informed. You are putting selective pressure on enrollment to prioritize parents who are able to advocate for and apply for their students. As you must know, this largely excludes ESL and economically challenged families. I suspect that there is a lack of feeling of responsibility for this to some degree, and if I'm correct, please reassess your role in this inequity. Access Academy is a vital school. It serves our children with special needs, which have not been able to met in their community schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Kathy Kemmerer and Margaret Eidinger.
You can go ahead and start. Thank you.
Thank you very much for hearing my testimony. I apologize that I'm reading from a paper, but English is not my native language. I came from Germany about 11 years ago. I have a daughter who is 12 years old at Access Academy, and I would like to just give a testimony for it. We moved to Portland from Cleveland, Ohio in summer of 2009. My daughter Christina entered Bridal Mile Elementary School in 5th grade. She had been tag identified since the first day in school here in Portland because of the test scores she brought with her from Ohio. We were waiting for any tag activity, but nothing ever happened. It was very confusing. At Bridal Mile, it took her 18 months to learn anything new in math. The difference between being tag identified in a public school in a Cleveland suburb and tag identified in a public school in Portland. My daughter has many behavioral issues, long-standing since kindergarten. She's very difficult to deal with, which I can attest to as single mother. However, at Bridal Mile, things got worse. Despite well-meaning staff, she was bored, felt made fun of, was even more disruptive in class than before, and also got depressed. She has a therapist. Access was a true lifesaver. I don't know what we would have done if the great Bridal Mile principal hadn't talked to us about Access. It is unbelievable what Access has done for my daughter. This is honestly the first school where she feels she belongs to, and where she started to make good friends who understand completely how she feels all the time, every day. She hated going to school. Now she hates vacation days and long weekends. What an awesome transformation. I would like to point out that in my view, Access is much more than an elitist school. It is a therapeutic institution. And I think we need these, especially with the recent happenings in Connecticut. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Kathy Kemmerer, Kemmerer. You heard earlier from my son, Ketcher, about what Access means to him as a first grader. I'm here to share a story from the parent perspective and to advocate for a physical space for Access that recognizes the unique value and will allow Access to grow. Ketcher entered kindergarten at Buckman, reading chapter books, writing detailed narratives in his various journals, adding and subtracting, and with an early grasp of multiplication and division. You heard him mention he quickly became bored and was particularly frustrated when his fourth grade reading buddy mispronounced words. And what he didn't share is how he unfortunately responded. He threw the book at his reading buddy and he hid under a table and he refused to come out. And that fourth grade reading buddy had a little brother in Ketcher's class who witnessed this, along with his fourth grade classmates. And this type of situation only added to Ketcher's struggles to make meaningful connections with his peers. And he exhibited increasing social anxiety over the weeks. His teacher was creative and struggled to challenge Ketcher. He didn't want to be separated because he already felt like the odd kid out, so he sat quietly with his classmates while they reviewed sight words or basic addition, and he began withdrawing on the way to school. And by Thanksgiving, he was suspended after an incident in which the stress became too much, and he kicked the teacher and pinched the principal. We worked with a developmental pediatrician and a play therapist to improve Ketcher's capacity to more constructively navigate his frustrations. We kept him home for all or part of the day if we felt like he was going to be prone to misbehavior. My husband met Ketcher for lunch and recess, and he volunteered in the classroom on Thursdays. And we saw great improvement, yet Ketcher still ultimately ended the year with 13 late starts and 15 absences, which is 16% of the academic year. And my husband and I had no idea how we would get Ketcher through another year of 30-hour weeks in a classroom environment that was so completely lacking in meeting his academic and social needs. Access immediately transformed his school experience at every level. Within 3 weeks, he engaged with his peers in ways we had not seen by the end of the year at Buckman. Other 6-year-olds who, like him, borrow books on the immune system and the Oregon Trail. He thrives on spelling words and definitions and complicated math patterns. And he's passionate about the Nobel Peace Prize laureates and aquatic ecosystems. He finally genuinely looks forward to going to school and doing his homework, and he's not missed a single hour of school this year, and he's not had any significant behavior issues. So his story is similar to that of every child at Access. Last year alone, about 70 kids like Ketcher, though, weren't as lucky and are on the wait list. And I can't adequately convey how thankful I am to PPS for establishing Access and supporting Access. There's simply no other option like it. And I appreciate the constraints you're facing, but as you weigh the difficult choices, please choose physical space for Access that will allow it to grow. Thank you.
Thank you.
And lastly, we have Nicole Dean.
Hi, my name is Nicole Dean. It's D-E-A-N. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk to you. I am the very proud mother of Olivia who came up here to talk to you. And I, like Kathy, am going to tell you why Access has been such an incredible gift to our family. Olivia, we've always known she was just a little different. So when she finally went into kindergarten, we were lucky to have a teacher who would give her extra to do. Unfortunately, that wasn't a good social fit for Olivia. She really was just lonely. So lonely that she would just withdraw because she had to do reading by herself, she had to do math by herself, and she would see her other friends only at recess, and that's not a way for a child to grow up, being isolated. So she finally came to us right before Halloween because she didn't want to go to school anymore. It wasn't fun. She wasn't enjoying learning. She didn't want to be a part of something that she could only do part-time. And we had no idea what to do at this point. We were at a loss. She was tested, tag testing upon recommendation from a teacher friend in an older grade. And we were shocked to find out that she was as high as she was. And we were also shocked to learn that there was a school for kids that qualified in this area. And having a child with sensory processing disorder is a whole other gambit on top of things. Transitions are really hard, and it took her 4 months just to really make friends to begin with, that the thought of moving her again was pretty heart-wrenching. But I already had a child who hated going to school, who only wanted to be there to play at recess and then just wanted to come home because she wasn't really doing anything at school that she couldn't do on her own at home. We've been so incredibly grateful for the experience. She has peers she can talk to and work with during table work and on projects, and they can communicate and understand. And because of what the differentiation from the teachers, they're able to delve so much deeper that she's actually getting a world and community view that was not available to her at her normal school. And for that, we're grateful as well, because we're all in it together, and I think that they're really good at producing that and showing the kids that. I worry, like the others, that there are children who are just perfectly normal, regular kids, just bright, who are sensory processing disorder kids and autistic and Asperger's, that are missing connecting with school and with their peers and having social issues because there's parents that don't understand the program is out there. And I feel it's not just our responsibility as parents of the school and administrators to go out and reach these people, which we're willing to do, but it's also important for PPS in general to reach out to every parent with a child that tag tests. I don't care their socioeconomic background.
Thank you.
I don't care what school they're at. I'm sorry if them leaving takes away money from the neighborhood school. It's about the kids.
Thank
and
you.
It's about making it good for them.
Thank you. We'll now move on if there's any board discussion about Resolution 4718.
So the only place we really address access is in just the directing staff to, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it would be helpful to just quickly read the resolution itself, because it's fairly short, and just to have that be in the record.
Sure.
It pretty much says it, I feel.
Would you like to do that?
Okay. So the resolution part begins, number 1, the board accepts the recommendation forwarded by Superintendent Smith to end the Ockley Green Focus Option K-5 program and consolidate Chief Joseph and Ockley Green to a single K-8 neighborhood school that will operate on both campuses beginning in September 2013. 2, the board acknowledges and appreciates the parents, teachers, students, community members, and neighborhood association representatives who have provided vital information and feedback throughout this process. It is clear that the Jefferson community's strong support for its neighborhood schools offers us a tremendous opportunity to work together to build strong, sustainable, and high-performing schools that prepare every student well for high school and college. 3, the board directs staff to work with the Chief Joseph and Ockley Green communities to develop implementation plans for student and staff transitions that support families. 4, the board directs staff to develop and recommend a process for a comprehensive review of school boundaries district-wide and policies related to student assignment and transfer to better align with the racial educational equity policy and promote strong capture rates in academic programs at every grade level. And finally, 5, the board directs the superintendent or staff to brief board members in June 2013 on the steps that are being taken to strengthen middle grades programs in Jefferson pre-K-8 cluster schools, the implementation of the consolidation and the review of policies. The board further directs that the superintendent or staff provide status updates in the fall and spring of each year for the next 3 years to monitor progress on the implementation of this resolution.
Thank
Just
you.
want to make sure that
Thank
was
you.
in the record.
Discussion?
I was going to mention that I think many of us helped the superintendent work through and come up with this resolution. So if the community's not seeing us, jumping on and trying to make changes, it's because we've kind of collaboratively worked on this throughout this whole process. So I want to thank you, Superintendent Smith, for taking in all of that and getting to this place. And I really also want to thank so many people in our community who stepped up and participated, and sometimes very passionately. And I especially appreciate that because it tells me how much you care about your kids, and it tells me how much you care about public schools in general and neighborhood schools. And it's important for us to see that passion and work with you. I had a little quote in the Oregonian this morning that I thought that this resolution was responsive to the community, but it wasn't necessarily that satisfying. I think there's a lot of pieces of it that feel good, but I think there's also several pieces that are unfinished business, including access, and really including King's low enrollment. We still have a school improvement grant from the federal government that's going to help us through next year. But clearly there's more work to be done because that school community is still too small for us to offer a robust program after that. So I am encouraging folks in the Jefferson community to stay engaged with us, and I think that we've put many things in this resolution that will allow us to get kind of frequent updates on progress. So I mostly want to just thank everyone for being involved and engaged in this process to the extent that you were. So thank you very much.
I'll start with the, given that I think that we heard some comments from Access, and I was actually quoted and quoted correctly, unlike some of the stuff that we get quoted sometimes in the newspapers. And I'm glad that the person that actually quoted me actually agreed with the statement. So for that, I think I'm thankful. What I do want to is apologize for the impact of my words in regards to offending, parents that I think I stated have a right to advocate for the best education they can get for their children. I think there's none of us are, here I think in our deliberations have argued against that and have actually opposed that. I think that there is a value in us as parents, in my case, parent and grandparent, becoming more organized to advocate better and more effectively for our students. And I'm glad to hear in the statements that were made by Access parents, the care and the concern also for other children that, whose families are also looking for a solution. Years ago, some of us were in the Student Achievement Committee, and the discussion was, being presented in regards to the challenges that pose in regards to the siting of Access with Saban and the limitations that space had. My comments, I think, in the context of the discussion last time, have a lot to do with the fact that I believe, and I still hold, that King was not the solution. So I think that's, I'm glad that the district, as a district, we are responding more effectively to the needs of students in that way. My daughter was also identified when she was at Beach Elementary School as a tag student, and I don't remember ever having any services provided to her in that sense other than the regular classroom experience. So I'm glad that there is improvement and that people feel, I think, positive about that result, and hopefully in this process we'll get to look at finding a space that'll be suitable. Mind you that sometimes that struggle takes a little while. Creative Science School was one of those two that took a while, and but they got their school now, right? What I think, I want to thank in particular Director Atkins, and who was in essence our wordsmith in many ways, in our leading editor and questioner in terms of the resolution, in terms of the language of it, and in that way, and also Director Morton in that way, because I think because of their work in particular, I think that we have a much better resolution before us. There are many things that are missing, as people would argue in regards to this, because it does not necessarily capture every little bit that we heard, out there from people. It does not mean that those things go away. In particular, I'm reminded of some of the statements that were made last time that we were at Ackley Green with the Latino parents, Vietnamese parents, and one African American mother that was present. And one of these things they should stress, and it's something that I think the community has stated for a long time, is that it's more than just making changes in regards to moving students from one place to another. It is about having strong academic programs in those schools. It is also, what I hear from folks in the community is having the staff before the students that have a proven, track record of improving the performing of the students, and the appropriate leadership in those school buildings to lead that effort. So, those things, although not spelled out in this thing, are some things that I believe staff would also values and is going to follow up on. So I want to thank my colleagues for their work in regards to making this thing an improved version.
Can I just ask one more question? How temporary is the two-campus merge? So, like, the two-campus setup, is it going to result in a closure, or is that still part of the conversation?
So at this point, it's not resulting in a closure.
Okay.
It's a single neighborhood K-8 that is now located on two campuses. So, and then we'll establish what the grade configuration is, but it's not framed as a temporary solution.
Okay.
And I think that's
Which is a change from what the original
Okay.
proposal was, which was to ultimately get, transition towards being located on the Ackley Green campus. And then the last round of conversations was, okay, keep both campuses and work on a grade configuration that lets us utilize both campuses.
I think that's part of the reason that the 3-year monitoring and oversight is in there, so that we can make sure that we build into our schedule and is transparent to the community when we do so, to evaluate how is it going, how is enrollment, how are efforts to grow enrollment going, what is the status of the changes to the transfer policy and so forth. So we're going to keep on this issue. It's not going to go away with this resolution.
Director Morton or Knowles?
Yeah, thank you. I think I won't speak about specifics, but more generalities, and I know how that bothers some people, but so I apologize. But I think in general this resolution is, although not completely satisfying, because so much of it relies on our implementation and how well that goes and how we partner with our community in that. I think it also represents some new values that we now have an opportunity to demonstrate in the review of policies that our district has that I don't think anymore reflect either the reality of our district being a sort of growing enrollment district and really the reality of how we'd like to address racial equity, racial educational equity in the district. So I like that as the a new opportunity here for us. I also like some of the new values that we're talking about in working with the community in this. So on several occasions, this resolution talks about engaging staff and community, and I think that's really important. Again, it comes down to how we're going to implement that, but I think that is a really good first step for us as a district to express that value. I think, too, this is important, and particularly around the King, the comments about King and how we address concerns before they become issues. All of us know that this SIG grant is ending. All of us have an opportunity now to address what are the concerns that we're going to be facing, what are the issues we're going to be facing when that happens. So right now we should be working on that solution so we can maintain the momentum that school has experienced during this funding process. And that's a new value that I think this resolution is sharing with us. And then two, this might not be new, it feels kind of new to me, but it's really creating a structure around accountability and providing dates. And here's where those of us who are passing this resolution are going to be responsible for hearing about this and beginning to make decisions and asking questions and holding the superintendent and the staff accountable to it. It's also a really great opportunity for us to, as a reminder, to re-engage community when we're not seeing the progress that we know we need to see in order to overcome some of these issues that again, we know we have. So I think it's again, not entirely satisfying because of some of the work that we still have to do. This isn't the end by any means. It's much more of a beginning, but also I think a really fantastic expression of what our new values are, and I'm excited about the opportunity that we have now to move forward with the community in creating solutions for the issues that we see.
You've said it so well, everybody, so I just won't say much more except really to thank the staff who worked so hard during months of a really arduous and challenging process, and the superintendent for her leadership and her staff in kind of getting us to this place, which I agree with what everyone has said. This is a starting point. We have the follow-through and implementation to do in working with the community, or as the resolution, which you were very kind, Co-Chair Gonzalez, to give me such credit, but really this is the staff's work, which we all just helped a little bit in tweaking, but it's their words. And what they say, when we say working together to change the story in the Jefferson cluster, that's really the heart of this, as well as our piece and the resolves that we are going to follow up and have that oversight and monitoring for the next 3 years. Or beyond as needed, but for sure for the next 3 years. So I just wanted to thank everyone at the district who was involved in bringing us to this point, and of course the community for hanging in there for what has been a really tough process, and for just the energy that I'm really excited about now that we can be working together in a positive way to strengthen schools for kids and make sure that everybody in the Jefferson cluster and across the district has a great experience despite all the challenges that we face. So just appreciate everybody's hard work.
So I think that everybody's pretty much already said the things that I would have to say about the resolution. I think that it has been a really long slog, I think, on this one. 6-7 months of community meetings. I'm hopeful that in the future we can find a better way to engage our community in a shorter period of time, not to cut off community input, but to find a better way so that we're not exhausting both the community and ourselves over when we're trying to make these so important decisions. And like everybody else, I'm not particularly satisfied with the outcome, but that's not because I don't think it's a good outcome. I do. I think it's more because of all the work that everybody put in, and it seems like it's a very small tweak to what we've done. But on the other hand, I'm very hopeful for what's going to be happening in the future. This is just the beginning again, and I'm looking forward to the work that we're going to do on both the transfer policy and on the boundaries. It's been work that I've looked at since I first started on the board 3.5 years ago, so I'm very excited that we are going to be moving forward with that. And I'm very supportive of the resolution. I was very aware as we were going through the whole process about the concern of stability in the Jefferson cluster, and it was a big worry for me. And so for that reason, I again, although I'm not satisfied with it, I think it's a good decision for us. Also helps relieve the overcrowding at Chief Joe and the under-enrollment at Ockley Green, and I think those are all, I'm very hopeful for both of those schools, especially as they move into this transition and this collaboration between the two, that they're both going to come out being even stronger schools after they work through this transition. But I think that one of the things we have to be very concerned about or watch as a district and as a board in support of those two schools is the kind of supports that we provide for them to help them make it through this transition. And I'm talking staffing support, community support, all the things that are in this resolution. They're on the paper. I'm just want to make sure that we truly track those things and make sure that we're giving those two schools one school every single chance for success that we possibly can, because it's very important. And then finally, I'm also very anxious and interested in what we're going to do with Access, because I think it's a wonderful program for students who really have special needs, and I think that that's the way that we should approach this program. They're very special students, and we need to make sure that they're provided with the education that they need, like all of our other students here in the district. So overall, I'm very excited about what we're about to do and looking forward to the challenge. So.
Great. Any other comments before we move on? Okay. Before we get to a vote, I'm just going to mention that if there are people here that are just for this resolution and you decide when we voted you're going to move out, just a reminder that sometimes people hang out in the back and they discuss and they're like, hey, can you believe? Voices carry really well and it becomes really difficult for those here to hear. So we have people usually that try to remind people, but it always feels a little uncomfortable kicking people out of a public space, but we are trying to finish the rest of our business, so thank you. So we'll now vote on Resolution 4718. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Resolution 4718 is approved by a vote of 6-0 with Student Representative Garcia voting
yes.
yes. Thank you.